Hey, Lighthouse, let's have a conversation. It's Friday. You made it. It's the end of the week. Hope you have a great weekend. Come to church. We'd love to see you. The question is another excellent question this week. It says, in a Bible study, I asked, when does faith begin? Great question. Barclay says, Barclay is William Barclay, I assume, is a Scottish commentator and theologian from the last century. So Barclay says that faith comes with receptivity. So when a man is at least willing to listen, so here are the questions. Is that my will? If so, how did I come about that? Or has it always been ingrained from the get-go? Man, that's something that we love to wrestle with. And I love to wrestle with it. And why do I have faith and that person doesn't? And do I have a choice in this matter? Or is it all predetermined? How exactly does this work? Well, I don't know that we're going to answer all these questions today, but let's give it a try anyway, or let's at least, like I say, have a good conversation about it. It's not the whole picture, but let's have a little bit of the picture. You know, when we talk about faith being a gift from God, we're really referring to Ephesians 2:8. Ephesians 2:8 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith." So see both sides of that. The grace of God is what saved you. You didn't earn it. But remember, Dallas Willard says, grace is opposed to earning. It is not opposed to effort. It does not happen somewhere else and get just wham, you're forced into it. No, rather, grace is all for you responding to that grace. So here you go. For by grace, it was just something God did, that God saved you. Amen. And you have been saved through faith. Well, faith is a word we need to talk about. We think about the word faith, and we talk about this a lot, you and I. We think about the word faith meaning something I think, or something I understand, or the side I'm on, or something like that. I'm a Christian. That's the side I'm on. I'm a Christian. I believe. I know that Jesus was real and died and rose again. But that's not exactly what faith means. So then Ephesians 2 continues, and this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God. Okay, question number 1, what is not my own doing? Is grace not my own doing? Is faith not my own doing? Or is it being saved that is not my own doing? I would lean towards that what Paul is saying in Ephesians is that your salvation is not your doing. Now that is not the same thing as saying you had no choice in the matter. I always say it like this. If you have an uncle that you didn't know you had, and he died and he left you $100 billion, and you went to the lawyer's office and the lawyer said, look, all you have to do to receive this $100 billion is sign your name on the bottom of this piece of paper, and it's all yours. Enter into the great inheritance that has been offered to you. Well, you would sign your name. You would say, yes, please, I would like this inheritance. Then you'd have $100 billion. And would you go around telling your friends, look what I did. I earned this $100 billion. No, of course you wouldn't. And yet, you did have a say in it. You could have rejected it. So the question really is, and I don't have the lockdown answer for this in a 12-minute video, but the question we wrestle with, theologians wrestle with, is, does every human have the ability to say yes to Jesus, or is that only available for some? And I would answer that question like this. From my perspective, I love arguing about that. I love thinking about it. I love talking about it. I love searching the scriptures. But I definitely rest here that from my perspective, from our perspective, we better live like every person has an opportunity to say yes to Jesus. That's how Jesus lived. That's how, it's what the Bible clearly says is God's will, that none should perish, but all should come to a saving knowledge of him. So let's go through and just get our terms right in this passage, and maybe it'll be helpful. So first of all, it says, by grace you have been saved. Well, what's grace mean? Grace is an undeserved gift. So it all is going to start with, it is very true that I did not just out of my own initiative, because I'm so smart, search all of the ancient texts and find that Jesus was the one. No, rather, Jesus introduced himself to me. The hounds of heaven are after you. It is not that any one of us, because of our own intellect, because of our own intuition, because we're just better people, we found Jesus and he's hiding from everyone else. No, 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 no. Rather, you would say, no, you did nothing to earn this gift. You didn't earn it. It was just something that God did. It was by a wonderful gift of grace that God has introduced himself to you, that God sent Jesus at all, that in your life you have been exposed to enough light to respond to. So, for by grace you have been saved. Well, what's it mean to be saved? A lot of times we think, oh, that means, I'm on the right side or I'm going to go to heaven. But actually, what the Bible talks about salvation is it's a transference from the kingdom of man to the kingdom of God. It's from the kingdom of sin and death to the kingdom of light. It's from outside the family of God to inside the family of God. So the big idea is always, as we look at these kind of technical discussions, we always need to put them in the context of a relationship, because that's what this is. This is not a list of dogmatic rules that we either adhere to or we not, and that means we're in or we're out. Rather, this is a life-giving, ebb and flow relationship, give and take. We have an actual relationship with the God of the universe. So what it means to be saved is to be in that relationship, to be under King Jesus, to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. So you don't earn your way into that kingdom. You don't just show up and go, hey, guess what? Now I'm in your family, God. No, rather, it's something God extends to you. This is the gift of grace, is a gift of, hey, you couldn't get here on your own. Rather, I had to offer you entrance into the kingdom. I had to offer you entrance into the family. You weren't going to storm the gates and end up in the kingdom of heaven. That's not how it's going to work. It's a gift of grace for you to be no longer in the kingdom of sin and death, but rather living in the eternal, abundant kingdom of Jesus that is now and extends for eternity. So it is by grace you have been saved, not anything you did, through faith. Well, so what is faith? Well, faith is necessarily putting your trust in someone. So I would lean on this side, that it is not that God has forced you to put your trust in him. Rather, it is your faith that activates the gift of grace that God has given you. So God has been that generous Father who invites you into great inheritance. And you, as a volitional human, get to say yes or no. And there's a lot of ways that theologians have worked this out, all the way from double-fisted predestination to the middle knowledge of God to, all kinds of other, definitions of election or whatever. But I think the big idea is all of these, to be orthodox, have to make room for human will. That it is your decision to put your trust in God, not just to decide Jesus is real, but to actually say, Jesus has told me to live a righteous life. I'm going to put my trust in him. I'm actually going to live a righteous life. Jesus has told me to forgive. I'm actually going to put my trust in him. I'm going to forgive. Jesus has told me to love my neighbor. I'm actually going to put my trust in him and love my neighbor. Jesus is calling me to worship him. I'm going to worship him. I'm going to give. I'm going to love. I'm going to act like Jesus wants me to act. That is how we put our faith in him. We're just talking about the book of James in this last week. It segues wonderfully, doesn't it? Do works lead to salvation? No. But salvation has works attached to it. As we say yes to Jesus, we're saying yes to living as one of his kids. So another thing about faith is that it grows. This might be one of the where did it start? When did I first be a person of faith? I would love to know when I actually got saved. I love to tell the story about being 6 years old and my mom praying with me, and that's all fine and good. And it's nice to have that, boom, this is when it happened. But and that might be salvation. That might be, you think of a marriage where there's dating and falling in love, and then a point where there's like, now we're husband and wife, and then a marriage after that. And that point of conversion is important. But a falling in love with Jesus and a learning to trust him is a gradual thing, isn't it? You're going to feel like it's very hard to trust him with very small things at first. And as that faith grows, you're going to be able to trust him with big things with relative ease because you've learned to trust him. So when did that start? That's a great question. It started the first time you said, I'm not going to live for myself. I'm going to put my trust in Jesus. I'm going to live for him. And it's my great understanding and hope that God has done enough for me, that God has done enough for you, and that God has done enough for every sin of every man and woman who will follow him. So the question from our perspective, how we can talk more videos, more questions, come on, or we'll sit around and talk about it. But from our perspective, from the human side of things, I think it's so valuable to say, I'm going to live my life in such a way where I trust that the cross was enough for every human. And I'm going to invite them into a relationship with Jesus, knowing that when they say yes to Jesus, they won't look around and say, this is something I did. Rather, they'll say, this is something God did. So when did faith start? Faith began when you put your trust, when you started making choices based on your relationship with Jesus. Beloved,